International human rights lawyer Anne Bayefsky. We've got Fox News contributor Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, former State Department official under President Obama, Joel Rubin. Joel, and you begin with you on this notion that this president is now very much inclined to want to find a way to get out of a deal he says the Iranians have violated. Have they? Have you heard any developments or updates that would indicate that the Iranians have violated it, or, as the president says, at least the spirit of that accord? What do you make of that?
Well, Neil, it's great to be with you. And no, the Iranians have not violated the deal. The International Atomic Energy Agency has corroborated that they're living up to it. The Trump administration just last week said as much in waiving sanctions. So what the president is articulating is a legitimate concern about Iranian behavior in the region. There should be no doubt that there are real problems there in Syria, Iraq, and elsewhere. But to undermine the nuclear deal would potentially give the nuclear bomb to Iran. We need to be very careful about not weakening this agreement and not isolating ourselves at the UN and with our allies on this critical national security issue.
You know, Alan West, one of the things that Benjamin Netanyahu has been arguing, of course, he was dead set against that agreement, but that the Iranians are secretly funding or helping the North Koreans. Do you have or know of any proof to indicate that?
Well, all you have to do is sit and look at some of the collusion activities between the technology that's been shared, the fact that we just recently had a North Korean vessel that was intercepted on its way to Syria, which is a client state of Iran, delivering chemical weapons. And I just take offense to what the gentleman just talked about. Iran was supplying explosive force penetrators to terrorists in Iraq that were responsible for about 20 to 23% of the casualties and deaths of our troops there. Iran has been firing off missiles as well as been testing missiles, and that's a violation. Iran has been making deals with Russia and others for the reception of conventional weapons and arms. That's a violation of the deal. So Iran has completely violated this deal. They continue to be the number one state sponsor of Islamic terrorism.
Well, let's separate. We don't know. I don't know what the truth is, guys, to be honest. But, Anne, the one question I would have of you is the biggest fear we have of North Korea right now is that the more we pin them into a corner, and it's justifiable, I understand not wanting to do that, the more they would entertain getting money or funds in the black market for some of their nuclear technology. Now, who supports that and who would help that process along is obviously a rogues gallery of possible candidates. But does that worry you?
What worries me is that we decide that we're going to outsource American foreign policy to the United Nations on North Korea. I mean, there's one thing that the United Nations is good at, and that's adopting resolutions. And there's one thing that it's not good at, and that's stopping nuclear proliferation. I mean, anybody who thinks that the UN is going to protect American national security has been taking their political lessons from movie stars. Sooner or later, we're going to have to get serious about North Korea. And, you know, it's true, yes, it's more isolated. But isolation sure isn't stopping Kim from putting food on his table.
Well, there is that. You know, Joel, one of the things that's happened, and whether it was under Barack Obama or George Bush before him or Bill Clinton before him, is that North Korea just keeps playing the same game and fooling one administration after another. The tact has got to change, but what should that tact be? What do you think?
You're absolutely right, Neil. And we've had 15 years of failed policy, and the danger now is that that policy is continuing under the Trump administration, but with an additional layer of blunt language that is war-oriented language that essentially prevents our ability from getting allies on board like China, who we need. They may not be an ally, but we will need them to strangle the North Korean.
But they're not.
Money
the
flow.
rap against them, Alan West, is that Chinese aren't budging.
But without China on board,
no, I understand.
We have
what you say
option.
is accurate, but China's not budging right now, right, Colonel?
No, he's absolutely right. And one of the things we need to understand, going back to the speech that Bill Clinton gave all the way up to the failure of strategic patience of President Obama, the erector platforms for these missiles are Chinese-made. That's what North Korea is using. And when we look at the United Nations today, we need to understand that the armistice that was signed on the Korean Peninsula was not between North Korea and the United States. It was between North Korea and the United Nations. That was the United Nations' first major test. And I can tell you right now, having a delegation from North Korea that will be sitting there in the General Assembly tomorrow, that shows a failure. They should be expelled.
No, finish that thought. I'm sorry.
They should be expelled, because when you fire a missile over a sovereign nation, that's an act of war.
All right.
But they're not even going to be expelled. I mean, here we have President Trump taking the stage in front of all of these countries who basically don't share our values. Half the people at in that audience are not fully free democracies. So the question is President Trump going to play to an American audience, going to understand that his applause ought to come from the ordinary American people that are nowhere near that General Assembly, or is he going to search for the applause lines of the assembled?
Well, I don't think he'll want to hold his breath waiting for applause lines there, but we'll watch very, very closely. Guys, thank you all very, very much.